Florida Secretary of Commerce, we really appreciate you, Alex Kelly, for joining us, having a conversation with us. I want to go ahead and start you off right now. Your big mission is fortifying Florida's economy. Can you talk a little bit about how you achieve that and exactly what does that mean?
Sure, great question, Curtis. Thanks for having me. It's a huge task, and there's a few key pieces to it that are working in Florida. For when we think about not just our economy we have today, but we always have to think about where we're going to be 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now, thinking ahead. And a lot of this stems from really the charge the governor gives us. And it's very specific and it's very focused on things that are going to drive both great results today, but also where we're going to be. First and foremost, our workforce. When you think about companies here that create jobs, companies that might move here, companies that might grow here, innovative entrepreneurs, CEOs who want to bring their great ideas here and hire Floridians, they can only do so if they have the talent. Nobody moves a company where they don't have the talent. That's not going to work, right? And so a lot of that model, a lot of what's working in Florida has to do with talent. We have an incredible 9 years in a row, #1 ranked higher education system in the nation. 9 years in a row, our state universities, our state colleges, our state technical colleges, even a lot of our school districts are really producing talent that's job ready, even out of high school in many cases. The second kind of key to that is infrastructure. So you've got to have great sites for businesses to open. Again, nobody moves a business somewhere where there's not a site that's ready for them, that's kind of connected to the community. We're here at the Broadband Summit, so nobody moves a business to a site where you're not connected, literally digitally, right? Roads, digital, water, all of those things, electric. Obviously, you've got to have power for your business. So infrastructure is key. Our governor, our state leaders have invested a little over $75 billion in infrastructure for roads, bridges, airports, seaports, even spaceports, just the last 6.5 years, and that's going to continue on. So the infrastructure is a key piece of it. Finance is key too. Florida has a great environment for individuals and businesses for purposes of taxes. Basically, we have low taxes. We have some of the lowest taxes in the nation. We have no personal income tax. This year, our legislature, under the charge of our governor, finally got rid of the business rent tax, which is phenomenal. That's a $1.7 billion savings for businesses all around the state. That's not to mention businesses that might come here as a result of that too. So having that kind of good financial approach, a state where lending institutions, investors, people who help grow companies, invest in companies, our state's perpetually AAA credit rated. The nation actually backslid a bit in its credit ratings. The state of Florida is still one of the top credit rated states in the nation. What that means, it sounds kind of wonky, it sounds kind of the details, but what it means is it means that banks and investors and people who invest in companies, they can feel confident because they have a strong reason to believe that companies in Florida have access to capital, have access to resources, and have the ability to succeed. So companies here are a good bet. The last piece of it that I think is important is just quality of life. It's quality of life. We're here, in Orlando and Central Florida, really all throughout the state of Florida. The quality of life here, obviously many people come here for that reason. It's not an uncommon story that a CEO of a company moves here and says this is amazing. They move their family here, they bring then their executives here, and then they say, why is the whole company not here? And people move here and they love it here and they're happy. Every time I go visit companies, every time I talk to somebody who is from another part of the country and moved here to work for that company, and they talk about the schools, they talk about low crime, they talk about just the quality of the communities you can live in, the scenic beauty, the way that communities in Florida are looked after and taken care of. It all adds up. It all adds up to why people want to be here, why they want to bring their families here, raise a family here, and why they enjoy Florida. At the same time, they can have a great job and they can contribute to a community they love.
It seems like a lot of incentives there to, to get those businesses to come to Florida. Absolutely. To really immerse themselves within the community. I want to know a little bit about how do you define a successful Florida economy here? And I know that's a big topic right nowadays when people talk about the economy. How's it doing? Does the Florida Department of Commerce have certain goals or benchmarks or indicators that they use to measure success, like a barometer here?
Curtis, we do, and we've even, the last few years, really kind of changed how we view that too. I think economic success historically, the way people have historically tended to look at it, at least our peers in other states have tended to look at it, is they kind of look at it around big, splashy economic announcements, this company, that company. We've kind of flipped that around and said, really, the first and foremost thing we should be measuring is small business. If we, small business, that's our new benchmark. That's the way we like to say it. And the more we see small business thrive here, have opportunity, have access to talent, have access to capital. The last 6.5 years, we've seen 3.8 million new businesses created in the state of Florida. So that means entrepreneurship here is accelerating. This is the strongest, and any way you measure it, this is the strongest state for entrepreneurship in the country. That means Floridians, even coming straight out of school, have an opportunity to create not just create a great opportunity for themselves, but to actually really create a great opportunity to hire other people too, and to kind of create prosperity in a community and really connect beyond just an individual's job to really actually create some ownership. So that ownership mentality at a small business level. Of course, we still celebrate the big successes
Absolutely,
too.
yeah.
But if you go to any big company, if you go to Publix, if you go to Lockheed Martin, if you go to Siemens Energy, if you go to any of these big, large companies, if you go to Jabil, any of these large companies that hire thousands of Floridians, that do amazing things, that sell their products around the world, what every single one of them will tell you, and usually they'll show you, is they'll show you that they've got about 400, 500, 600 suppliers, most of whom are small businesses based in Florida who have 15, 20 employees, and they will tell you they don't exist without those small suppliers who maybe they're making one crop, maybe they're making one sensor, maybe they're making one way to measure whether something's successful or not, one component part, and those small suppliers, that is, if you decide, Curtis, if I decide that tomorrow I want to go do something different, it's our ability to actually enter the market, make something, contribute, and actually have a likelihood of success. I'll give you just a phenomenal stat that's not true in most of the country. The average Florida manufacturer has fewer than 16 employees.
Really?
Yeah.
That's actually pretty interesting.
We have over 27,000 manufacturers, which, by the way, if you just go back to when the governor started, we had about 20,000. Now we have over 27,000. It's the fastest growth in the nation. The average manufacturer has fewer than 16 employees. That's phenomenal, because that means that if anybody says, you know what, I know how to make something, and I know that product solves a problem and it's going to help overall a larger world of commerce, we actually have access to get the financing, start the company, hire the talent, and we can do so meaningfully and contribute, without having to hire hundreds of people, without having to take huge risk and a lot of financial exposure. We can enter the market, contribute, and grow a business. So we've really changed our view, our key metric, to say that small business is our benchmark.
Really? And that's interesting to me, because you would think about, increasing job opportunities for people and everything. So I want to ask you this then, how do you offset that, so to speak, if you want to, people looking for jobs? I know we cover stories all the time, and we see people saying, I want more jobs, but if you're saying that, hey, at least the smaller companies may not be hiring as much, how do you kind of offset that to say that Florida can hire more people and there are more opportunities for people who are seeking jobs?
Well, remember, those smaller companies, small businesses in the state represent half the employees in the state. So it's about 50-50. About half the people in the state work for a large business, about half the people in the state work for a small business. And you can't just look at it through the lens of a large company, because, look, large companies, especially publicly traded companies, they're critical. We have some incredible companies in the state, but those larger companies, they already have a solid foundation. They already have a sort of solid economy behind what they do. For a small company, when they go out and go from 10 employees to 15 employees, first off, for those 5 people, that's a big deal. But secondly, for that company, that's a huge deal. And that says that company has confidence, that company, they know now they have maybe a line of sales, a line of business that's expanding. They have reason to believe, they're literally taking on a 50% growth in their company by 5 people. When that CEO of that small company goes from 10 to 15 employees, that's a pretty dramatic moment. Of course, we do measure these things at a broad level. We do look at all total job numbers. We do look at the broad metrics. What I find though is that when you look at these things through a small business lens, when you make that kind of your number one focus, you really are getting down to that entrepreneurial spirit that makes, I think, not just Florida, but our country unique. A founding sort of economic principle of our country is the idea that individual can chart their own destiny and they can take ownership of that company, ownership of that idea. It's something that even, if you kind of tie this back to manufacturing, it's so different. When the governor came in, he really prioritized manufacturing and really made a shift in what we do. And that was important because when you make something, when you produce a product, you are the owner of that, you create that, then really truly you're driving at that point your own economy. You're not just sort of relying on outside forces. If you're one of 5,000, 6,000 who works for a company, that's great, and maybe you're selling something around the world, and that's great. But if you're one of 10 or 15 who's working for a company, you have a pretty significant driving ability for that product or that commodity. And when you look through that lens of the economy at that small business level, and you look at that and you say, okay, you're seeing all the small business growth, you're seeing confidence in capital, the ability for people to form companies and hire and really take on that early stage risk and succeed at it, you're really looking at literally the confidence of the economy through the lens of small business. And you really get a pretty informative answer about really the ability of people to say, I'm going to create it, own it, and I believe I can succeed, and I can believe I can even bring others with me.
Okay. That's key there, especially as you try to map out, even more growth and prosperity throughout Florida on the job market and the business growth market. I want to ask you a quick Google search tells us that Florida's economy is the 15th largest in the world, not even just the U.S., but the entire planet. Yeah. That's pretty big. So how do you sustain that growth, and when you're talking about the world stage,
You have to care about both the big picture. There are macro level forces. Our tax policy as a state, the overall climate that we create for business and industry, those companies that just organically see that we have the talent, that we have a great tax climate, that we have infrastructure that can support maybe those companies being near their customers, getting their product to their customers, and having a great place to do business. You have to care for the macro level because many times most people, they're going to make this decision simply based on the decision to start a company, to relocate a company, to grow a company. They're going to make that decision looking at all those decisions you've made, and they're going to look at the results, right? They're just going to look at the plain sighted results of, do you have the talent? Do you have the infrastructure? Do you have the financial conditions? So you have to care for that. At the same time, you have to get hands-on for that individual company. There are many companies, that do come to us, they come to our partners.
I was going to ask you if they come to you guys or you have liaisons that work with them.
Both. So we have partners in every single county in the state, in some cases multiple. We have regional partners, we have other state partners, some are public, some are private. And it really is a true public-private statewide partnership model. And some of them are statewide associations like the Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Florida Council 100, but some of them are just the local economic development council that works on behalf of that community, like the Orlando economic team here in Orlando, OEP. They're a partner here, and we have partners all up and down the I-4 corridor that we work with.
So if I can ask you real quick, do these, the like OEP, do they go into these companies and they work with them to help see to the success of them, or do they help provide them things that they may need? Maybe they need to work some things out with the state so that they can have a few more parameters to do certain things.
It's both, and sometimes too, it's also bringing in another partner. So it's not uncommon, for example, for an OEP or for ourselves at Florida Commerce to work with a small business, and let's say that business might need help developing an export marketing plan. So then we might pull in the State Small Business Development Center network, who specialize in writing export marketing plans for small businesses, or we might bring in the Florida High Tech Corridor Council, and the Florida High Tech Corridor Council might help that company with, again, something related to technology, right? How they maybe source the supply chain resources they might need. So it really is a partnership model. Sometimes we are the ones very hands-on. We do a lot of work with small businesses on the finance end of things. We have some financial products that we actually administer, some loan products. We have some venture capital partners. So we work very hands-on with a lot of companies in that regard. But a lot of other times companies need somebody to sit down with them and, like I said, actually just write a business plan. We have partners to do that too. So it is a very hands-on process, and you have to at that individual level care for that company. I look at it like it's an urgent race to basically prevent a business fail, right? If that company is coming to us and they're looking for help, they're coming to one of our partners, we urgently have to prevent that business fail, because that company, that might be one person, but tomorrow it's 2, the next day it's 10, a year later it's 300, right? And pretty soon they're manufacturing that product at scale, and they're maybe even exporting that product around the world. And we sit at that pivot point where they were maybe about to give up, but they needed somebody to say, here's how to get some financing, here's how to write a business plan. You can export. Let me give you the ABCs of how to export.
But it's pretty good that you guys are able to provide that help and assistance. And I know we've reported on several local organizations like other chambers of commerce organizations that help out some small businesses as well. I want to ask you this: do you have a roadmap for the future? I know that we're looking towards what's next.
Sure.
Do you lay out 5-year, 10-year, 30-year plans? I mean, how does this work, and how do you frame it so succeeding administrations, of course, continue to work on what you're doing now?
Yeah, I actually come back to my roots. My roots were more education, and I eventually kind of, in my career pathway, I eventually sort of worked my way into the world where I was a little bit of education and economic development with workforce development in the middle of that, kind of learners to earners, and then eventually I've landed over more in this economic development and workforce development world. Along that journey, though, I grew a deep appreciation for what happens in education, starting in kindergarten. And I really do look at it like it's a K through 20 journey. That doesn't mean you have to go all the way through university, but I'll give you an example. Digital literacy. We're in this constantly increasingly digital economy, right? And all the jobs that we have require you to have those skills. The state of Florida, at the governor's direction, completely rewrote in 2019 how it is that we start providing digital education for kindergartners, starting at that age, because ultimately those skills, whether you go get a job right out of high school, maybe you go get a certificate, maybe you go get a 2-year credential, maybe you go to 4-year university, no matter what you do, and no matter what kind of job you have, and no matter whether it's a career and technical type of type of labor, like a very hands-on labor, no matter what you do, there is a digital component to it today. You cannot escape the fact that those skills matter. Moreover, those skills matter just in your own personal management of your own life.
Absolutely.
How to set a username and password, how to manage your finances, or perhaps maybe your job is to do that for somebody else, or everything in between. So those skills, we worked very hard as a state. I was actually at the State Department of Education at the time. We worked very hard as a state to really embed those skills at every grade level, because ultimately we want that learner, whatever journey they're on, whatever career pathway they want to go to, whatever jobs that they want to try out in life, maybe own a business, we wanted to know that learner had digital skills, cybersecurity skills, computer science skills.
Because it's pretty much the new frontier right now, yeah.
And we know, look, 30, 40 years from now, we can't totally predict what the jobs are going to look like, but those skills are going to be needed. And we want that learner to have that ability to be a continuous learner, to have that skill building. And we also see this from the other end of what we do. So the other end of what we do today, and it's so critically important, we were also here this week at the State Workforce Summit, is we work with, every year, thousands upon thousands of Floridians who they didn't get those skills because maybe they were educated at a time when those things weren't taught.
Absolutely.
And so they're missing those skills. And they show up, either maybe they've lost their job, or maybe they just want a better job, but they don't have the skills. And we work with those Floridians too, our local workforce boards around the state, Florida Commerce, Career Source, our partners in the Department of Education. We work with those learners too, because they may be 30, 40, 45, 50, but they want something better for themselves, for their family, and they know they need these skills. And it's never too late to learn, and so it's critical too that we serve those Floridians too. But having that ability, coming back to your question, when you have that ability from that early grade level to really teach those skills, you can't totally predict the future, right? But I do know, and the evidence always says that a great education, starting at that level and building those skills, it'll pay off for years to come.
All right, Secretary Kelly, we do appreciate you spending some time with us and chatting with us.
Absolutely. Thank
All
you.
right,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
so much. I appreciate it, sir.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. To keep up with important issues impacting our communities and hear more conversations with the people who are shaping the future, subscribe to our channel. You can also download our app or find Spectrum News on your TV for balanced, in-depth political coverage and more.